Robert Hayes pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the Grand Meridian Hotel, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished marble floor. It was just past midnight, and the lobby had finally gone quiet. The last guests had checked in, the bar had closed, and the night shift was settling into its familiar rhythm. He'd been doing this job for 7 years now. 7 years of mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and wiping down mirrors that reflected a face he barely recognized anymore. At 52 years old, Robert had become part of the furniture. The kind of person people's eyes slide right past. A ghost in a maintenance uniform. The hotel staff knew his name, of course. They'd nod when they passed him in the service corridors, maybe offer a quick good evening if they weren't in a hurry. But that was about it. Nobody asked about his day. Nobody wondered about his life before he started pushing this cart through these hallways. And that was fine with Robert, mostly. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the hands now gripping a mop handle had once danced across piano keys in front of hundreds of people. Those same fingers that scrubbed toilets and polished brass fixtures had once played Rachmaninoff and Debussy with precision and passion. It felt like a different lifetime now. Back when he was 23, Robert had been a student at the Eastman Conservatory, one of the best music schools in the country. He'd practiced 8 hours a day, every day. His professors said he had something special. Real talent. The kind that could take him places. Then his mother got sick. Cancer. The aggressive kind that doesn't wait for anyone's plans or dreams. The medical bills started piling up faster than he could count. His father had passed away years before, so it was just Robert and his younger sister trying to figure everything out. Insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. He'd taken a semester off. Just to get things sorted out, he told himself. Just until Mom got better, but she didn't get better. And the bills kept coming. His sister was still in high school, needing food and clothes and a roof over her head. The semester off became 2 semesters. Then it became forever. Robert found work wherever he could. Restaurant jobs, warehouse shifts. Eventually, he landed the night janitor position at the Grand Meridian. It paid better than most, and the hours meant he could have his days free to take care of his mother during those final months. After she passed, he just stayed. What else was there to do? Go back to school? He was 26 by then, broke, exhausted. His hands, which had once been insured for $10,000 by the conservatory, now smelled like bleach and floor cleaner. The dream had died so slowly he barely noticed it happening. But music has a way of staying in your bones. Late at night, when the hotel was at its quietest, Robert would sometimes find himself in the lobby, standing near the old upright piano that sat in the corner by the fireplace. It was mostly decorative. Guests rarely touched it, and when they did, it was usually just to peck out chopsticks or some half-remembered tune from their childhood. The piano was always slightly out of tune. Nobody seemed to care enough to have it serviced regularly, but to Robert, even out of tune, it was beautiful. Sometimes, when he was absolutely certain he was alone, he'd sit down on the bench and play, softly so the sound wouldn't carry to the upper floors where guests were sleeping. Just little melodies. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would draw attention. Those moments were his secret. His small rebellion against the life that had swallowed his dreams. For 5 or 10 minutes, he wasn't a janitor. He was a musician again. His fingers would remember complicated passages he hadn't played in decades, moving almost on their own. And for those brief moments, he felt like himself. The hotel had been going through renovations lately. Big ones. The owners wanted to modernize the place, make it competitive with the newer hotels downtown. Construction crews came and went during the day, tearing down walls and updating electrical systems. The noise was constant, the dust was everywhere, and it made Robert's job twice as hard. As part of the renovation, the management had decided to finally do something with the East Wing. That section of the hotel had been closed off for as long as Robert had worked there. Maybe longer. He'd asked about it once early on, and the maintenance supervisor had just shrugged. Old part of the building. Structural issues or something. Been sealed up since the 70s. Now Robert had been assigned to clean it. Just basic work. Clearing out debris, sweeping, making sure the construction crews had clear access to whatever they needed to fix. It was strange walking through those corridors. Everything looked frozen in time. Old wallpaper peeling off the walls. Light fixtures from another era. furniture covered in dusty white sheets like ghosts waiting to wake up. The east wing gave him an odd feeling. Not scary exactly, more like walking through a museum after closing time, all these remnants of the hotel's past just sitting there, forgotten. He wondered how many people had walked these halls back when they were new and elegant. How many stories these walls had witnessed. Most of the doors in the east wing were locked or nailed shut. Management only wanted him cleaning the main corridors, not exploring. But Robert noticed things. Little details. The craftsmanship was different here than in the newer parts of the hotel. More ornate, the woodwork was hand-carved. The ceiling moldings were works of art. This place had been special once. Really special. He could feel it. One night, while mopping the basement level of the east wing, Robert noticed something unusual. There was a draft, cold air seeping up from somewhere beneath him. He looked down and saw a door he'd walked past a dozen times before without really seeing it. Just a plain service door, painted the same institutional gray as all the others, but air was coming from under it. Fresh air with a strange quality to it, almost like the way air feels in a large enclosed space, like a gymnasium or a warehouse. Robert knew he should probably just ignore it. Keep mopping. Finish his shift, go home. That's what the old Robert would have done. The practical Robert who'd learned not to ask too many questions or stick his nose where it didn't belong. But something made him stop. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was boredom. Or maybe after 7 years of being invisible, he just wanted to see something nobody else had seen. He tried the handle. To his surprise, it wasn't locked. The door was just stuck, swollen from years of humidity. Robert set down his mop and put his shoulder against it. Once, twice. On the third push, it groaned open, revealing darkness and a narrow staircase leading down. Robert stood at the threshold, his heart beating faster than it had in years. Every practical instinct told him to close the door and walk away. But that small part of him that still remembered what it felt like to dream, that part that still played piano in empty lobbies at midnight, wanted to know what was down there. He grabbed his flashlight from the cleaning cart, took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway into the dark. The staircase was narrow and steep. Robert's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating worn wooden steps that creaked under his weight. The air got cooler as he descended, and that strange feeling of open space grew stronger, like there was something big waiting at the bottom. He counted the steps as he went down. 15, 20, 25. This was taking him much deeper than he'd expected. Far below the basement level where he'd started, the walls were bare stone here, rough and cold to the touch. This was old construction. Really old. Probably from when the hotel was first built. At the bottom of the stairs, Robert found himself facing another door. But this one was completely different from the plain service door above. This door was made of heavy dark wood, carved with elaborate designs. Even under the dust and grime of decades, he could make out the patterns. Musical notes, instruments, lyres and harps twisted into decorative borders. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the handle. It was brass, tarnished to a dark greenish-brown but still solid. He tried to turn it locked, his heart sank. Of course it was locked. What had he expected? He stood there for a moment, feeling foolish. He should head back up, finish his shift, forget about this whole thing. But then he noticed the handle had moved slightly. Not locked. Just stuck, like the door above. Robert set his flashlight down on the floor, pointing it at the door so he could see. He gripped the handle with both hands and pulled. Nothing. He tried pushing instead. The door didn't budge at first, but then he felt it give just a tiny bit. He pushed harder, putting his full weight into it. With a groan that seemed to echo forever, the door swung inward. The smell hit him first. Old wood and fabric. Dust and age. But underneath that, something else. Something that made his chest tighten. It was the smell of a place that had once been loved and used and full of life. A place that had been abandoned too long. Robert picked up his flashlight and stepped through. The beam of light swept across the darkness, and what he saw made him freeze completely. He stood there, not breathing, trying to make sense of what he was looking at. Then, with shaking hands, he moved the flashlight slowly from left to right, taking it all in. Rows and rows of seats. Hundreds of them. Red velvet, faded and dusty but still elegant. They curved in gentle arcs, all facing toward a stage at the far end. The walls were decorated with intricate moldings and panels. Even in the darkness, even covered in decades of neglect, he could see this place had been spectacular. Robert walked forward like a man in a dream. His footsteps echoed in the vast space. The acoustics were incredible. Every tiny sound seemed to hang in the air. He'd been in concert halls before, during his conservatory days, and he knew what good acoustics felt like. This place had been designed by someone who understood music. As he got closer to the stage, his flashlight found more details. Carved wooden railings, old-fashioned light fixtures that probably hadn't worked in decades, a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, massive and ghostly under its coating of dust. Then he saw it, and his heart nearly stopped. At the center of the stage sat a grand piano. Robert climbed the steps onto the stage slowly, almost afraid the whole scene would disappear if he moved too fast. The piano was covered in a thick layer of dust, its black surface barely visible underneath. But even in this state, he could tell what it was. The shape, the size, the brass fittings on the legs, a Steinway. A concert grand Steinway. He moved closer, his flashlight showing him more details. The piano bench was still there, pushed under the keyboard. Sheet music sat on the music stand, yellowed and brittle with age. Someone had been playing here, and then they just stopped. Left everything exactly as it was. Robert's mind was racing. Where was he? What was this place? He'd worked in this hotel for 7 years and never heard anyone mention a concert hall. Not once. He set his flashlight down on the piano bench, angled so it would light the keyboard. Then, with a tenderness he usually reserved for nothing in his life anymore, he lifted the fallboard that covered the keys. They were yellow with age, some slightly discolored, but they were all there. 88 keys waiting. Robert reached out and touched middle C, barely pressing it down. The hammer inside struck the string, and a note rang out into the darkness. The sound was beautiful. Slightly out of tune, yes. The piano hadn't been serviced in who knows how long, but the tone was there. That rich, resonant quality that only a really good piano has. This instrument had been worth a fortune once. Might still be if it could be restored. Robert sat down on the bench. Dust puffed up around him and he started coughing. But he didn't care. He put his hands on the keys, feeling their familiar shape under his fingers. It had been so long since he'd played a real piano. The upright in the lobby was fine for late-night moments, but this was something else entirely. He started with something simple. Just scales, C major up and down. His fingers remembered the patterns, even if they were stiff from years of manual labor. The notes filled the empty concert hall, bouncing off the walls and ceiling, surrounding him. Then he played a chord. Then another. His hands found their way into a melody. Nothing complicated. Just an old song his mother used to love. Claire de Lune by Debussy. He'd played it at her funeral. The tears came suddenly, surprising him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Not at the funeral. Not in all the years since. But here, in this forgotten place, playing this forgotten piano, something broke open inside him. He kept playing through the tears. The piano's out-of-tune strings didn't matter. The dust didn't matter. His rusty technique didn't matter. For the first time in 26 years, Robert felt like himself again. Not the janitor. Not the guy who'd given up his dreams. Just himself, a musician, someone who'd loved music more than anything. When he finished, the last notes faded slowly into silence. Robert sat there, his hands still on the keys, breathing hard. The empty seats seemed to watch him, waiting for something, wanting something. He looked around the concert hall again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just an abandoned room. This was a tragedy, a place built for music, sealed away and forgotten. All these seats that should be filled with people. This piano that should be played every night. This beautiful space that should be bringing joy to the world. What had happened here? Why was it closed? And more importantly, why had nobody ever mentioned it? Robert knew he should probably leave. Get back to work before anyone noticed he'd been gone so long. But he couldn't make himself stand up. Not yet. He played another song. Then another. Each one felt like coming home after being lost for years. He didn't know how long he sat there. Could have been 30 minutes. Could have been 2 hours. Time felt different in this place. Like the outside world didn't quite reach down here. Finally, reluctantly, he closed the fallboard over the keys and stood up. His legs were stiff. His back ached from sitting. But his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Robert picked up his flashlight and took one last look around. He'd be back. He had to come back. This place had woken something in him that he'd thought was dead and buried with all his other dreams. As he walked toward the door, he noticed something he'd missed before. A brass plaque mounted on the wall near the entrance. He wiped the dust away with his sleeve and read the engraved words. The Meridian Hall. Grand opening October 1924. Let music fill these walls forever. 1924. This place was almost 100 years old, and for most of that time, probably, it had been sitting here in the dark, silent, waiting. Robert climbed back up the stairs, his mind spinning with questions. When he reached the top and emerged back into the basement corridor, his cleaning cart was right where he'd left it. The hotel was still quiet. Nobody had noticed he'd been gone. He finished his shift in a daze, going through the motions automatically. But his thoughts were somewhere else, down below, in that beautiful, forgotten concert hall, with that piano that still had music left in it. By the time his shift ended and the morning sun was starting to rise, Robert had made a decision. He was going back tonight, and the night after that, and the night after that, for as long as he could. He'd found something down there in the darkness, something he didn't even know he'd been looking for, a second chance. Robert kept his promise to himself. The next night, after finishing his regular cleaning duties, he went back down those stairs, and the night after that, and the night after that, the hidden concert hall became his secret, his sanctuary, the one place in the world where he felt truly alive. At first, he just went there to play the piano. But after a few nights, something shifted in him. He couldn't stand seeing this beautiful place covered in so much dust and neglect. It felt wrong, disrespectful even, like leaving a cathedral to rot. So he started bringing cleaning supplies with him. Not the industrial stuff from his cart. He went to a hardware store on his day off and bought gentle cleaners, soft cloths, wood polish. The kind of things you'd use on valuable antiques. Because that's what this was. Every surface, every detail was valuable. He worked slowly and carefully, one section at a time. He'd clean for an hour or two, then sit at the piano and play for a while, then clean some more. The velvet seats were the hardest. Years of dust had settled deep into the fabric. He used a soft brush and a handheld vacuum he bought with his own money, working row by row, seat by seat. The carved wood panels on the walls came back to life under his careful polishing. Intricate designs emerged from under the grime. Flowers and vines and musical instruments all intertwined. Someone had spent months carving these by hand. Robert ran his fingers over them, feeling the dedication in every curve and line. The stage floor was made of hardwood, scarred and dulled by time. He got down on his hands and knees and cleaned every inch of it. When he finally finished and stepped back to look, the wood gleamed in the glow of his work lights. He'd brought down a couple of battery-powered lamps to give him better light than his flashlight, but it was the piano that got most of his attention. Every night before he played, he'd wipe it down, polish the wood, clean between the keys with cotton swabs. He was careful not to damage anything. This instrument was probably worth more than he'd earned in the last 5 years combined. During his days off, Robert spent time at the public library. He'd never been much of a researcher, but he needed to know about this place. He needed to understand what he'd found. The librarian helped him navigate the old newspaper archives. They had everything on microfilm going back to the 1800s. Robert started in 1924. The year on the brass plaque, and there it was, right in the October 15th edition. Grand Meridian Hotel opens spectacular concert hall, the headline read. The article went on for 3 columns describing the opening night celebration. The governor had been there. Famous musicians, society people from all over the state. The Meridian Hall was supposed to be the cultural heart of the city, a place where world-class performers would come to play. The article described the Steinway piano as a gift from the hotel's founding family, valued at $12,000. In 1924, that was an enormous amount of money. Robert did the math in his head. Adjusted for inflation, that piano would be worth over $200,000 today, if it was still in good condition. He kept digging through the archives. For decades, the Meridian Hall had been exactly what it was meant to be. Jazz legends played there in the 30s. Classical virtuosos in the 40s and 50s. The newspaper reviewed concerts regularly. The place had been famous. Then in 1973, the articles stopped, Robert searched for months after that date but found nothing. Finally, in a small item from March 1974, he found a brief mention. Meridian Hall temporarily closed for structural assessment. That was it. No follow-up. No explanation. The hall had just vanished from public consciousness. Robert tried to find out more, but it was like the place had been erased from history. Temporarily closed had turned into permanently forgotten, and nobody seemed to care or remember. Back in the hall, Robert's nightly visits had become a ritual. He'd finish his shift around 1 in the morning, then head down to his secret world. By now, the place looked dramatically different. The seats were clean. The stage was spotless. The walls gleamed. Even the chandelier looked better, though he couldn't reach high enough to clean it properly, and every night he played. At first, he stuck to simple pieces, songs he remembered from his conservatory days. His fingers were rusty and his technique needed work. But slowly, night by night, it came back. Muscle memory is a strange thing. His hands remembered passages he'd forgotten he ever knew. He started working on harder pieces. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. That had been his signature piece back at the conservatory, the one he was supposed to perform at his senior recital. The recital that never happened because he'd dropped out to take care of his mother. The first time he tried playing it all the way through, his fingers fumbled. He messed up sections he used to play in his sleep. It was frustrating, embarrassing even, though nobody was there to hear his mistakes, but he kept at it. Every night he'd work on it, sometimes just one difficult section, playing it over and over until his hands hurt. Other nights he'd run through the whole piece, stumbling and recovering, pushing through. The hall's acoustics made everything sound more beautiful than it really was. Every note seemed to float in the air, sustained by the perfect design of the space. Playing here was nothing like playing the out-of-tune upright in the lobby. This was what music was supposed to sound like. About 3 weeks into his nightly visits, something changed. Robert was playing Chopin, his eyes closed, completely lost in the music. And suddenly he wasn't just playing notes anymore, he was feeling them, the way he used to, back before life got complicated, before bills and responsibilities and grief had pushed music to the edges of his world. Tears started running down his face. He didn't stop playing. The sadness in the music, Chopin's melancholy beauty, it matched something in his own heart. All those years of pretending he didn't miss this. All that time telling himself he was fine with how life had turned out. It had all been a lie. He missed music. He'd always missed it. Every single day. He'd just buried it so deep he'd almost convinced himself it wasn't there anymore. When he finished the nocturne, he sat there crying like a child. His whole body shook. He cried for his mother, gone 22 years now. For his younger self, who'd had such big dreams. For all the concerts he never played. For the life he could have had. But he also cried because he was here now. Because somehow, impossibly, he'd found this place. This perfect forgotten concert hall with its Steinway grand piano. And for these few hours every night, he could be who he was always meant to be. After that night, Robert approached the piano differently. It wasn't just practice anymore. It was reclaiming something precious that had been stolen from him. Or maybe that he'd given away without realizing what he was losing. He started expanding his repertoire. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Debussy's Arabesque, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which was almost impossible without an orchestra, but he played his heart out anyway. He played jazz standards and classical masterpieces. He played Broadway songs his sister used to love. He played everything he could remember and everything he could find sheet music for. The empty seats didn't bother him. In some ways, playing for an empty hall was easier. There was no pressure, no judgment. Just him and the music and the perfect acoustics carrying every note into the darkness. Sometimes he'd imagine the seats filled. Hundreds of people in elegant clothes the way they would have been in the 20s and 30s. The chandelier lit up and sparkling. The stage bright with lights. And him at the piano, not in his janitor's uniform but in a tuxedo, playing for an audience that actually wanted to hear him. It was a nice fantasy, but even without it, this was enough. This was more than enough. Robert had always thought the best part of his life was behind him. That he'd peaked at 23, when he was at the conservatory with a future full of possibilities. Everything after that had just been survival, making it through one day, then another, then another. But sitting at that piano in the hidden concert hall, his fingers dancing across the yellowed keys, Robert realized something important. Maybe his life wasn't over. Maybe it was just paused. And maybe, just maybe, he'd found the play button. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if anyone would ever find out about the hall, or if he'd have to keep it secret forever. He didn't know if the piano would eventually break down completely, or if the hotel would discover the open door and seal it up again. All he knew was that right now, in this moment, he was happy. Really, truly happy, for the first time in longer than he could remember. The music filled the empty hall, beautiful and alive, and Robert played on into the night, a janitor who had become a musician again, even if the only audience was ghosts and memories and the darkness itself. He had found his sanctuary. And for now, that was everything. Victoria Chen had been the general manager of the Grand Meridian Hotel for exactly 4 months. 4 months of long days, difficult decisions, and stress that kept her awake at night. At 38, she was the youngest person to ever hold this position at the hotel, and she felt the weight of that every single day. The owners had hired her to turn things around. Bookings were down. Online reviews were mediocre. The hotel was losing ground to newer, flashier places downtown. They wanted fresh ideas, energy, someone who could make the Grand Meridian relevant again. So Victoria worked. She worked early mornings and late nights. She reviewed every department, every process, every expense. She talked to staff and guests and competitors. She was determined to prove she deserved this job. Tonight was like most nights. It was almost 11 o'clock and she was still in her office reviewing budget reports on her laptop. The hotel had gone quiet. Just the night staff now, keeping things running while guests slept. Victoria rubbed her tired eyes and stood up to stretch. Her office was on the 2nd floor, in what used to be part of the original hotel building. She liked it because it had character. High ceilings, original woodwork, windows that actually opened, unlike the sealed ones in the newer sections. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. Lights everywhere, cars moving on distant streets. She thought about going home, but home was just an empty apartment. No husband, no kids, no pets even. Just her and her career and the constant pressure to succeed. That's when she heard it. Music. Faint and distant, but definitely music. Piano music, Victoria frowned. The lobby piano wasn't being played. She could see the lobby from her window, and it was empty except for the night clerk at the front desk. So where was the music coming from? She listened more carefully. It was coming from below, somewhere underneath her office. The sound was muffled, like it was traveling through walls and floors, but it was there. Beautiful and sad and haunting. This wasn't the first time she'd heard it. Over the past few weeks, she'd noticed it several times. Always late at night, always when she was working alone. At first, she'd thought it was coming from a guest room, someone playing music on their phone or laptop. But the sound quality was wrong for that. This sounded like a real piano. She'd asked the night staff about it. Nobody knew what she was talking about. Either they hadn't heard it, or they thought she was imagining things. Victoria had almost convinced herself she was. Maybe it was stress. Maybe she was working too hard and her mind was playing tricks on her. But no, there it was again. Clear and unmistakable. Someone was playing piano somewhere in this hotel. Victoria grabbed her keys and left her office. The hallways were dimly lit, quiet except for the soft hum of the HVAC system. She followed the sound, or tried to. It was hard to pinpoint. The music seemed to drift through the building like smoke, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. She went down to the 1st floor. The lobby was quiet. The night clerk looked up as she passed, but Victoria just smiled and kept walking. She didn't want to explain what she was doing. Partly because she wasn't even sure herself. The music was louder now, definitely coming from below. The basement level, but that didn't make sense. The basement was just storage rooms and mechanical equipment. No pianos down there. Victoria found the stairs to the basement and descended. The music grew louder with each step. Her heart was beating faster. This was strange. Really strange. Who would be playing piano in the basement at 11 o'clock at night? The basement corridor was poorly lit. She didn't come down here often. This was maintenance territory. But she could hear the music clearly now. It was coming from the east wing, the old section that was being renovated. She walked toward the sound, her footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. And then she saw it. A door standing open, a door she didn't even know existed. Light was coming from inside and the music was pouring out. Victoria stood at the top of a staircase looking down. Someone was down there. Someone was playing piano in a part of the hotel she didn't even know existed. Her first thought was security. This could be a break-in, someone accessing areas they shouldn't be in. She should call security. That would be the smart thing to do. The safe thing, but something stopped her. The music was too beautiful, too heartfelt. This wasn't someone vandalizing the property. This was someone who loved music, really loved it. Victoria started down the stairs. She went slowly, quietly, not wanting to disturb whoever was playing. The staircase seemed to go on forever, down and down into the depths of the building. When she finally reached the bottom and saw the carved wooden door standing open, her breath caught. Musical notes carved into the wood. Instruments. This door was old. Really old. Original to the building, probably. How had she never known this was here? She stepped through the doorway and froze. A concert hall. A full massive concert hall hidden beneath her hotel. Rows of red velvet seats. A stage with a grand piano. Ornate walls and a chandelier. The place was lit by battery-powered work lights scattered around the stage, creating pools of light and shadow. And at the piano sat a man in a janitor's uniform. Robert. She recognized him. She'd seen him around the hotel pushing his cleaning cart. They'd exchanged nods a few times but never really talked. He was just part of the background, part of the staff that kept things running. Except right now he wasn't just a janitor. His fingers moved across the piano keys with skill and confidence. His eyes were closed, his whole body swaying slightly with the music. He was playing Chopin. Victoria recognized it from her own piano lessons as a child, playing it beautifully. She stood in the shadows at the back of the hall, not wanting to interrupt. The acoustics were incredible. Every note rang out pure and clear, filling the space. This hall had been designed for music, built for it. How long had this been here? Why didn't anyone know about it? And how had Robert found it? The piece came to an end. The last notes faded into silence. Robert sat still for a moment, his hands resting on the keys. Then he sighed deeply and opened his eyes. That was beautiful, Victoria said. Robert jumped like he'd been shocked. He spun around on the piano bench, his face going pale. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't be here. How long have you known about this place? Victoria asked. She stepped out of the shadows, walking slowly down the center aisle toward the stage. Robert stood up looking terrified, like a kid caught doing something wrong. A few weeks, maybe a month. I found the door by accident. I was just cleaning and you've been coming down here to play piano? Yes, ma'am. After my shift. I've been cleaning it too, making it nice again. I haven't damaged anything, I swear. I've been really careful with everything. Victoria looked around the hall with fresh eyes. It was clean. Remarkably clean, considering how long it must have been abandoned. The seats, the stage, the walls. Someone had put serious work into this place. You did all this? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Why? Robert looked at her, confused. Because it's beautiful. Because it deserves to be beautiful. This place. It shouldn't be forgotten like this. Victoria walked up the steps onto the stage. The piano was gorgeous. A Steinway, if she wasn't mistaken. Old but well-maintained. She ran her hand along its polished surface. How long have you played piano? She asked. I studied at Eastman Conservatory. 26 years ago. I was going to be a concert pianist. But life happened and I had to drop out. I haven't played seriously since then. Until I found this place. You sound pretty serious to me. Robert didn't know what to say to that. He just stood there waiting to be fired. Waiting for her to call security and have him escorted out. Victoria sat down on the piano bench. She hadn't played in years. Her parents had made her take lessons as a child. She'd hated it then, but now she wished she'd paid more attention. She pressed one key, then another. The sound was incredible. Play something else, she said, standing up and moving to one of the front row seats. Ma'am, play, I want to hear more. Robert stared at her. You're not firing me? Not right now. Maybe after you play, so you better make it good. A tiny smile tugged at the corner of Robert's mouth. He sat back down at the piano. His hands found the keys and he started playing. Something bright and fast this time. Joyful. His fingers flew across the keyboard and the music filled the hall like sunshine. Victoria sat back in the velvet seat and closed her eyes. When was the last time she'd just listened to music? Really listened? Not just having it play in the background while she worked? She couldn't remember. The music washed over her, and for the first time in months, the knot of stress in her chest loosened. Just a little. Just enough to remind her that there was more to life than budget reports and occupancy rates and staff schedules. When Robert finished, Victoria opened her eyes. She was crying, she realized. Actually crying. She quickly wiped the tears away, embarrassed. "Sorry," she said. That was really something." "Thank you," Robert said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Victoria stood up and walked back onto the stage. She looked around the hall again, seeing it not just as a forgotten space but as a possibility. "Tell me everything," she said. "Tell me about this place. When you found it, what you know about its history. Everything." And so Robert did. He told her about the brass plaque, the newspaper articles, the grand opening in 1924, the mysterious closing in 1973, his nightly visits, the careful cleaning and restoration, the way the piano had helped him remember who he used to be. Victoria listened to every word. And slowly an idea began forming in her mind. An idea that was either brilliant or completely crazy. "Maybe both, Robert," she said when he finished. "How would you like to help me bring this place back to life?" Robert thought Victoria was joking at first. Bring the concert hall back to life? That would cost a fortune. The hotel owners would never agree to it. And even if they did, why would they listen to him? He was just a janitor who'd stumbled onto a forgotten room, but Victoria wasn't joking. Not even a little bit. Over the next week, she worked like someone possessed. She pulled old blueprints from the hotel archives. She contacted structural engineers to inspect the hall. She researched similar venues in other cities. She built spreadsheets and presentations and business plans. Robert kept doing his regular job, but Victoria would find him during his breaks. She'd show him her plans, ask his opinions, bounce ideas off him. It felt surreal. A month ago, he'd been invisible. Now the hotel's general manager was treating him like a partner. "The owners are coming next week," Victoria told him one afternoon. "I'm presenting the idea to them. I need this to work, Robert. This hotel needs something special, something that makes us different from every other place in the city." "What if they say no?" Robert asked. "Then I'll keep trying." "But I don't think they will. The numbers make sense. A concert venue could bring in revenue. Wedding receptions, corporate events, actual concerts. This hall is wasted sitting empty. And what about me?" Victoria looked at him seriously. "What about you? I'm just the janitor who found it. Once it's reopened, I go back to mopping floors. Right? Is that what you want?" Robert didn't answer. He didn't know what he wanted. A month ago, his life had been simple, predictable. Now everything felt uncertain and full of possibilities he didn't know how to think about. The day of the presentation arrived. Victoria had arranged for the owners and several board members to come see the hall. Robert wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to work his normal shift and stay out of the way. But Victoria found him anyway. "I need you to play," she said. "What? No, I can't." "Yes, you can. They need to hear what this hall sounds like. They need to understand its potential. Please, Robert." His hands were shaking as he followed her down the stairs. The hall looked different now. Victoria had brought in proper lighting. The chandelier had been cleaned and actually worked. Engineers had declared the structure sound. Everything was ready except for the decision. 6 people in expensive suits stood in the center of the hall, looking around with expressions Robert couldn't read. Victoria led them through her presentation. She talked about revenue projections and market opportunities. She showed them the historical photographs she'd found. She explained how the Meridian Hall could become a cultural landmark again. They listened politely. They asked questions, but Robert could see the doubt in their faces. This would be expensive, risky. Why spend money on an old concert hall when they could renovate guest rooms instead? Then Victoria gestured toward the stage. "I'd like you to hear something. This is Robert Hayes. He's been on our maintenance staff for 7 years. He's also a classically trained pianist. Robert found this hall and has been maintaining it. He's going to play for you now." Robert wanted to run. His legs felt like they might give out as he walked to the stage. These people didn't want to hear him play. They wanted to get back to their offices, make their decision and leave. He sat at the piano. His fingers found the keys. And then, Because he didn't know what else to do, he closed his eyes and started playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The piece started soft and gentle, almost hesitant, like someone whispering a secret. His fingers moved across the keys and the familiar melody filled the hall. All those nights of practice, all those hours of remembering how to be a musician, it all came together now. The music grew stronger, more confident. Robert forgot about the people watching. He forgot about being nervous. He just played. He poured everything into it. Every regret, every dream, every moment of joy he'd felt sitting at this piano in the empty hall. When he reached the final notes, he let them hang in the air. Slowly fading, the silence that followed felt heavy, important. Robert opened his eyes and looked at the audience. One of the women was wiping tears from her face. An older man was staring at the ceiling, his mouth slightly open. The lead owner, a stern-looking man named Mr. Patterson, was just looking at Robert with an expression he couldn't read. "How much would the full restoration cost?" Mr. Patterson asked Victoria. "We estimate $800,000. That includes structural work, new seating, updated electrical and HVAC, restoration of the piano, proper lighting and sound equipment. That's a lot of money." "Yes, sir, but we'd recoup it within 3 years based on conservative projections, and the publicity value would be significant. Nobody else has anything like this." Mr. Patterson walked up onto the stage. He looked at Robert. "You've been cleaning this place?" "Yes, sir. Why?" Robert thought about the question. "Because it deserved better than being forgotten." Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. Then he turned to Victoria. "Go ahead with the restoration. But I have one condition." "What's that?" "Mr. Hayes here plays the reopening concert. If we're bringing this hall back, we should do it right. He found it. He cared for it. He should be the one to welcome people back." Robert felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Sir, I haven't performed in front of people in decades. I'm not ready for—" "You just performed for us," Mr. Patterson interrupted. "You did fine. Better than fine. Think about it." Over the next 3 months, the hotel transformed the Meridian Hall. Professional cleaners went through every inch. The velvet seats were restored or replaced. New lighting was installed. The Steinway piano was taken away for complete restoration by specialists who gasped when they saw it. When it came back, it sounded better than Robert had ever imagined, and Robert practiced. Every day, Victoria had quietly adjusted his schedule, giving him more flexible hours. He spent mornings sleeping and afternoons practicing. At night, he'd do light maintenance work, but his main job had become preparing for the reopening concert. He was terrified. Absolutely terrified. The last time he'd performed for an actual audience, he'd been 23 years old. Now he was 52 with rough hands and rusty technique. What if he forgot the notes? What if people laughed? "Nobody's going to laugh," Victoria told him. "You're good, Robert. Really good. Trust me." The night of the reopening came faster than Robert wanted. The hall was packed, every seat filled. Victoria had invited local musicians, music critics, journalists, hotel guests, and staff members. She'd even found Robert's sister, who he hadn't seen in 5 years, and brought her in from out of state. Robert stood backstage in a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit right. His hands were sweating. His heart was pounding so hard he thought people might hear it. Then Victoria appeared beside him. "It's time. You ready?" "No." "Good. The best performances come from people who care enough to be nervous. Go out there and show them what this hall can do." Robert walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. He couldn't see most of the faces in the audience, which was probably good. He sat at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. The Steinway gleamed under the lights, perfect and beautiful. He placed his hands on the keys. And then he started playing. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne filled the hall, and something magical happened. All the nervousness fell away. This was just him and the music. The same as all those nights when the hall was empty. The same as when he'd practiced as a young man. The same as it had always been. His fingers knew what to do. They danced across the keys, pulling emotion from strings and hammers and wood. The audience disappeared. The stage disappeared. There was only music. When the nocturne ended, the hall erupted in applause. Robert opened his eyes, stunned. People were standing. Everyone was standing. The applause went on, echoing off the walls of the restored concert hall. He played 3 more pieces that night. Each one brought more applause. When he finally took his bow and walked off stage, his sister was crying. Victoria was grinning like she'd won the lottery. Even Mr. Patterson was smiling. The next morning, reviews appeared in newspapers and online. The Meridian Hall returns in triumph. Hidden gem restored. Janitor turned pianist steals the show. A week later, Victoria called Robert into her office. The owners want to offer you a new position. Artist in residence, you'd perform twice a month. Give piano lessons to staff members' kids. Help program the concert series. And you'd keep a salary better than what you're making now. Robert sat down slowly. Are you serious? Completely serious. You brought this hall back to life, Robert. You should be part of its future. He thought about it. Thought about the life he'd had before he found that door. Thought about all the years of just getting by, just surviving. And then he thought about sitting at that Steinway playing for people who actually wanted to hear him. Yes, he said. Yes, I'll do it. The Meridian Hall became one of the city's premier music venues. Local musicians performed there. Students gave recitals. The hotel hosted wedding receptions and corporate events in the beautiful space. And twice a month, Robert Hayes played piano for audiences who came specifically to hear him. He wasn't invisible anymore. People knew his name, his story. But more importantly, he knew himself again. The man who loved music. The man who'd thought his dreams were dead but found them sleeping instead, waiting in a forgotten hall beneath a hotel. Sometimes, late at night after everyone had gone home, Robert would sit at the piano in the empty hall, just like he used to, and he'd play for the ghosts and memories, grateful for the door that wouldn't stay closed, grateful for the second chance he never expected to get, the janitor who found a hidden concert hall, the musician who found himself again. They were the same person. They had been all along.